At 4:42 a.m., the desert wasn't silent. It was waiting. Beneath the cold night sky of southern Arizona, the wind moved across the jagged cliffs and dry cactus fields like a ghost, carrying with it an unspoken tension. On the other side of the border, engines rumbled softly. Diesel trucks, armored vehicles, and refrigerated containers packed with a lethal secret. The Sinaloa cartel thought this would be their boldest move yet. A massive convoy crossing into U.S. territory under the cover of darkness, carrying enough fentanyl to kill 200 million people. To them, this was power. A declaration, an act of defiance meant to show Washington that the cartel could do what it wanted, when it wanted, and no one could stop them. But what they didn't know was that America had been listening. Every call, every signal, every footprint had already been mapped. And on this night, 3,000 U.S. troops were waiting in the sand, unseen, unheard, and unmoving. What happened next wasn't a battle. It wasn't a firefight. It was execution. Silent, flawless, merciless, and the cartel would never recover. Stay with me, because what unfolded in the Sonora Desert was more than a clash of guns. It was a warning written in fire. For years, the Sinaloa cartel thrived in the shadows. They didn't need to march in with armies or wave flags. They controlled territory through bribes, fear, and silent networks that stretched from Mexico to American cities. But in late July of 2025, that balance cracked. On July 29th, a joint DEA and Mexican military operation struck deep into cartel territory. In a single night, authorities seized over 40 tons of precursor chemicals, dismantled a major fentanyl processing hub, and arrested 17 technicians, one of whom was the son of a powerful commander. For Sinaloa, it wasn't just about money. This was humiliation, betrayal, and proof that their supposed allies in Mexico's government had turned on them. The cartel needed to reassert dominance. They needed to prove that fear still belonged to them. And so, the order went out. Operación Roto. Operation Torn Sky. The plan was reckless but symbolic. A convoy of armored trucks, SUVs, and fentanyl containers would cross into the United States, attack Border Checkpoint 13 in Arizona, rescue seized shipments, and retreat before dawn. It was meant to send one clear message to both Washington and Mexico City: we are untouchable. At the head of this bold strike was Salvador Elinki Carranza, a ruthless commander with a $10 million bounty. Known for orchestrating assassinations and overseeing drug networks in Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico, Carranza believed no one could stop him. But what he didn't know was that his entire convoy had already been tracked, mapped, and marked for destruction long before the first engine roared to life. The Sinaloa cartel believed that stealth was on their side. Their convoy moved like shadows, headlights blacked out, radios silent, engines muffled as they crept through the Sierra El Panacate Pass. It was a corridor long used for smuggling, now repurposed into an invasion route. To the cartel, it felt like secrecy. To America, it was exposure. For more than a year, U.S. intelligence agencies had been watching. The Department of Defense's Border Analytics Center had quietly mapped every driver, every fuel stop, every burner phone credit purchased by cartel operatives. Signals from satellites, cell towers, and even ground vibrations were being logged in real time. What Sinaloa thought was invisible had already been dissected and reconstructed into a digital map. And waiting inside that map was Killbox Bravo. Hidden sensors, buried along the border, were wired to an encrypted system that needed only one trigger: the first tire crossing. At 4:42 a.m., that trigger was met. No alarms rang out. No searchlights swept the desert. Instead, a single encrypted signal rippled through the network. Killbox Bravo activated. Across the desert floor, 3,000 U.S. troops lay motionless. Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, Army Rangers, Marines, the 82nd Airborne, clustered into 14 tactical groups, positioned for 40 hours without a sound. Their faces were coated in red dust, their weapons locked on target. The cartel thought they were marching toward a checkpoint to destroy. In reality, they had stepped into a coffin of their own making. The desert wasn't silent anymore. It was listening, waiting, ready to strike. At exactly 4:44 a.m., the desert erupted. What had been stillness just moments earlier transformed into a carefully orchestrated storm. From nearly 20 kilometers away, a HIMARS battery fired its first salvo. 6 missiles screamed through the night at near Mach 3, invisible to radar, unstoppable. They slammed into the convoy's second command vehicle, tearing the armored truck apart and hurling bodies into the darkness. On the cliffs above, SEAL Team 6 snipers squeezed their triggers in unison. Laser-guided rounds pierced armored glass, dropping gunners before they even had time to raise their weapons. The convoy's defenders never saw their killers. Then came the drones. Switchblade 600 loitering munitions launched from hidden bases, locking onto trucks carrying heavy machine guns. Each strike turned steel into fireballs, scattering flames across the desert floor. But the deadliest moment arrived when Delta Force operators flanked from the north. They aimed Carl Gustaf anti-tank weapons straight into one of the refrigerated containers. Inside, over 400 kilograms of pure fentanyl. The explosion ripped the container apart, sending a toxic white cloud spilling across the desert. Fighters scrambled, choking, blinded, panicked. Some fled their vehicles, only to stumble into drone-guided mortar fire. Within 7 minutes, the convoy was in chaos. 11 vehicles destroyed, others immobilized by directional mines hidden beneath the sand. Radios spat static. UAVs dropped lifeless from the sky as signals were jammed. The cartel thought they had come to hunt. But in those first minutes, they realized the truth. They had walked into an execution. If the opening salvo shattered the convoy's armor, what came next destroyed its soul. The cartel had prepared for gunfights, for ambushes, even for airstrikes. But they had no defense against an enemy they couldn't see. From an underground command post in Tucson, the REAP-X electronic warfare system came alive. Suddenly, every GPS screen in the convoy went haywire. Coordinates shifted, maps inverted. Units that believed they were retreating west were actually driving east, straight into American minefields. A logistics team, convinced they were falling back to safety, instead rolled into a pre-programmed kill zone where claymores and artillery awaited. Cartel radios fared no better. Frequencies were jammed, scrambled, or spoofed. Fighters shouted desperate commands into headsets, only to hear false orders echo back, phantoms leading them deeper into chaos. Commanders had no way to regroup. Panic spread faster than bullets. And then the Phoenix X drones struck. Coated with radar-absorbing material, they had been circling silently for over an hour, undetected. When given the order, they released precision bombs from above. No sound, no warning. One moment a vehicle sat intact. The next, it was engulfed in flames. The cartel fighters raised their rifles to the night sky, firing blindly into the darkness. But there was nothing to shoot at, no enemy to face, no soldier to challenge. They weren't fighting men anymore. They were fighting ghosts. This wasn't war in the traditional sense. It was data as a weapon, algorithms turned into artillery. And for Sinaloa, there would be no escape. Just when the convoy thought the nightmare couldn't deepen, the desert itself seemed to rise against them. From dry riverbeds, hollowed-out rocks, and old border patrol bunkers, American soldiers emerged, men who had been lying motionless for nearly 2 days. These were units of the 82nd Airborne, Delta Force, and Rangers, fanning out in silent arcs across the battlefield. Small groups of 6 to 10 men moved with precision, guided by real-time drone feeds overhead. They didn't rush. They didn't shout. Each sniper shot was calculated, each burst of gunfire a clean removal of another target. The cartel, already blinded by jammers and scattered by explosions, now faced an enemy they couldn't track. Gunmen fired wildly into the night, spraying bullets at shadows. Every muzzle flash exposed them, and every flash drew a countershot that ended their fight. In the chaos, U.S. intelligence flagged a high-value thermal signature, an armored vehicle attempting to break south. Inside was Victor El Lobo Cardenas, one of the cartel's most feared commanders and the mastermind behind fentanyl distribution across the American Southwest. Nicknamed the Deaf God of the Cities, his capture had been a priority for years. A UAV strike crippled his vehicle, flipping it onto its side. Minutes later, U.S. forces closed in, neutralized his guards, and pulled him from the wreckage. Alongside him, they seized encrypted drives mapping cartel smuggling routes and naming Mexican officials suspected of corruption. The encirclement was nearly complete. By dawn, the cartel had nowhere left to run. As the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, the Sonora Desert revealed the full scope of destruction. What had once been a convoy of steel, firepower, and arrogance was now nothing more than smoldering wreckage. Burned-out SUVs lay twisted in the sand, armored trucks sat torn open like tin cans, and the black smoke of burning oil and rubber curled high into the sky. In just 93 minutes, the U.S. military had dismantled an entire cartel battalion, over 300 fighters eliminated, 46 vehicles destroyed, and 6 fentanyl containers reduced to ash. The sheer scale of the victory stunned observers. A force that rivaled a small army had been erased before dawn. And the most remarkable detail? Not a single American soldier was lost. But amid the silence of victory, one image stood out above all others. A U.S. soldier knelt beside a 17-year-old cartel recruit, his face burned, his hands trembling as he still clutched a bent AK-47. Instead of finishing him off, the soldier gently pried the weapon from his grip and offered him a water bottle. It was a rare moment of compassion in the middle of a battlefield defined by precision and ruthlessness. That single photo spread across social media within hours. To the world, it became the defining symbol of the battle, proof that even in the harshest fight, humanity wasn't lost. Yet behind that compassion, a warning lingered. America's silence was not weakness. It was a promise that any who crossed the border would face the same fate. The Sonora battle was more than a military victory. It was a message written in smoke and silence. The Sinaloa cartel had believed it could march into U.S. territory with impunity, flaunting its power in front of both Washington and Mexico City. Instead, it was erased in less than 2 hours, its leaders captured or dead, its weapons scattered in ruins across the desert floor. But the lesson wasn't only for the cartel, it was for anyone watching, for rival cartels plotting their next move, for hostile states probing America's borders, for those who thought the U.S. had grown too slow, too divided, too distracted to defend itself. What Sonora revealed is that America no longer needs to fight with sheer numbers. Its strength now lies in patience, preparation, and precision. Troops waited in silence for 40 hours, unmoving, invisible, until the moment came. When it did, data, algorithms, and electronic warfare crushed an army without exposing a single U.S. position. The cartel fought with bullets and bravado. America fought with silence and science. And that made all the difference. For every enemy watching, the warning is clear. Crossing the border doesn't mean a firefight. It means walking into a battlefield that is already mapped, already waiting, already decided. This time, it took 90 minutes to dismantle a force of 300. Next time, America may not need even that. The desert remembers, the desert listens, and when the line is crossed, the desert strikes. The Battle of Sonora was never about chance. It was about preparation. The Sinaloa cartel believed it could send a message of dominance by storming across the border, but in truth, it walked straight into an American trap that had been set long before the first engine roared. Every move had been anticipated, every signal intercepted, every route mapped. By the time the first tire touched U.S. soil, the outcome was already written. What makes this story remarkable isn't just the firepower. Yes, missiles, drones, and electronic warfare tore apart the convoy with ruthless precision. Yes, 3,000 U.S. troops coordinated flawlessly, without suffering a single casualty. But the true power lay in discipline, the willingness to wait. For 40 hours, soldiers lay hidden, silent, and unseen. They didn't rush, they didn't reveal themselves. They waited until the exact moment when silence could become thunder. That patience is what destroyed the cartel. And in that silence came a warning. For cartels still plotting, for rivals testing boundaries, for adversaries watching from afar, the message is simple. America doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to broadcast its power. It can wait, it can listen, and when the time comes, it can strike like an invisible blade. Sonora was not just an ambush, it was a declaration carved into the desert. Borders are not merely defended by walls or checkpoints, but by preparation, technology, and resolve. And for those who think they can cross that line, The desert is already listening.